Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I'm Jim, joined by Josh and Owen. And then Josh, I realize you just switched your name to Joshua. So do we have to change how we are calling you out?
No, I just put the full name in there today.
So we are here today to cover the Indianapolis Colts and the Los Angeles Chargers. We're going to go through the roster. I should say we're going to go through the schemes. We'll talk about the roster a little bit and the draft class a little bit as it pertains to the scheme. But before we do that, we were having our, let's say, pre-podcast discussion. Apparently where Josh is in Delaware, you're in triple-digit temperatures.
Yeah, it's been hot here for the past 3 days. No wind, just straight heat gusts going down 100 degrees the past 3 days. And it's so weird. It flipped from 75 degrees literally less than 10 days ago straight into a heat wave. So we're battling over here. Owen's battling in Buffalo. Big heat wave going on.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, it sounds like it's worse inside your car than it is outside.
Yeah, so it's been like 70s and stuff, and then during the day it's like super high, like 10, 11 or whatever the highest one is, UV index, while also being like 90 plus. And I choose to record in my attic, which is a room by itself that I have like my couch and I have some cat stuff up here. But it's the stuffiest room in my house, and I have no AC in my house. And the only thing I have up here that'll save me is a window that points right to a busy road that has like semis driving past it, so I keep it closed for recording, and a fan that I don't want to have any background noise for the recording. So I'm currently like melting. You can see I just pulled this out of the fridge, and it's like dripping water off of it.
Huh. Well, we will try to keep everybody hydrated during the podcast. We don't want anybody passing out from the heat. I'm not going to rub in the fact that, Owen, I have air conditioning here, so I am very comfortable in my seat. I won't rub that in, but I do have AC, and you might hear me repeat that a few times just because that's who I am. But the Indianapolis Colts, Josh, how would you describe the offense?
The offense is very much been held back, but has a really high potential when you look at the overall grand scheme of things, thinking about the potential of quarterback Anthony Richardson at his highest. We have seen the peaks, but inconsistency comes to mind when I first think of the Indianapolis Colts. They're able to run different plays in the run game, both gap and zone. Jonathan Taylor has been a workhorse for them for the past couple of years now. He's had a really strong beginning to his career, and the Indianapolis Colts, finally, after all the contract extension bullshit with him, got that under control with Jonathan Taylor, and now he's their steady mate in the backfield. They don't have to worry about that, but they have the quarterback game open to them. They have the deep passing game open to them. They have the short, intermediate, yard after catch stuff open to them, but the inaccuracies with quarterback Anthony Richardson and his development has really held back this team to where they can be competitive in a wild card race, so to say.
And Owen, how about you? How do you see the Colts offense?
Yeah, the Colts are a weird one. So they have good weapons, specifically in the passing game with Downs, Pierce, Pittman Jr. I like a lot of what they have, but they've struggled to pass the ball ever since they stopped doing the quarterback carousel of grab the 39-year-old veteran that hit the market that's past his prime, from Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan. Carson Wentz had his trip there, Nick Foles. Like, you had a bunch of guys there that they tried to keep that passing game going that they had when I think Jacoby Brissett had a decent season there a couple years ago. But like, so you had some of that running around when it came to their previous attempts at solving the quarterback position. Then you had Anthony Richardson come in, him and Gardner Minshew. Minshew's not really who they're playing their offense around. Now they're looking for more, and they're ideally going to do more power. They have some power gap stuff where it comes with Quentin Nelson being a puller, kicking guys out, John Taylor being the run that. They've also got a ton of options and RPO baked into that. If you have a guy who's going to run the ball as Richardson and Taylor in the backfield, having them both be an option in one play to attack with their legs and making the defense have to play both correctly or you're going to get gashed was like the optimal idea they had for that offense. Unfortunately, Richardson doesn't threaten with his arm as much as you'd like him to, or stay healthy long enough, or not tap himself out of games when he does run the ball. So they struggle to really set an identity, even though they have the blueprints and the foundations to do so. Daniel Jones now being their starter with Richardson being hurt and probably Daniel Jones being the better quarterback right now. He's got some of that mobility, so I don't know if you specifically want to run a lot of option with Daniel Jones as your quarterback, but he's capable of it, I would call him. I wouldn't say he's not like an immobile quarterback, and he's a better thrower of the football. I think for them, they need to just capitalize on the amount of weapons they have. They also have Adonai Mitchell as like a backup receiver behind those three we talked about earlier. Tyler Warren was just a high draft pick for them, who I thought was like arguably up there with Brock Bowers as a tight end prospect for me, level of player. So you have guys, and even talking about Tyler Warren, when you're talking about how like versatile his offense can be. Tyler Warren took snaps as Wildcat quarterback at Penn State, and he has like that run after catch ability that makes him special at that position. So you have like you could see them doing like a 2-back triple option with Tyler Warren, Jonathan Taylor, and Anthony Richardson, and defense is not knowing how the hell to play that. But when it comes to like they have a bunch of stuff they could do that's exotic, but when it comes to just coming in, playing football with Richardson at quarterback, they just haven't been able to do so. I think with Jones, maybe I heard this comparison a lot recently. I forget who I was listening to. I think it was so Colin Cowherd had some NFC scout on recently. They were talking about some bold predictions, and they had the Colts winning the AFC South was Cowherd's bold prediction, and the scout seconded that because he said Daniel Jones doesn't need to be 40 touchdowns, pushing 4,000 yards, running this as a Pro Bowl quarterback. He needs to be Alex Smith in the Niners. He needs to be a capable guy, give you 22 touchdowns through a full season of starts, and be able to keep that run game going with his legs and feed the guys who are actually the talented players on this offense.
Yeah. So, Josh, what's your outlook for the Colts?
It's such a tough one when you look at it, because you look at that general manager, he's drafted well on both sides of the ball the past 2 years. And it's not an issue where you look at this offensive line and go, okay, they're the catalyst to all these issues. No, they've been able to draft guys second, third, and fourth round, develop them into quality starters. And they might not excel like Quentin Nelson once did as an elite Pro Bowl guard, but all of them are solid starters and able to hold up their own in pass protection and move off the line in the run game. So it's not a concern of the offensive line. Their big issue as a weapon on the offensive side of the ball with their tight end position, and boom, you go grab Tyler Warren with your first round pick, the most shoe-in, fill-in pick that anybody could have ever mocked during this pre-draft process. But they have addressed a lot of the issues on the offensive side of the ball. You can even talk about their backup running back scenario. Used to be a crapshoot. Zach Moss provided for a little bit in that 1 year before he signed with Cincinnati. But now you got Khalil Herbert back there and DJ Giddens, the 5th-round pick, who I was a little bit lower on, but he's in a great situation to get snaps early on and contribute in the way that he can. I don't think it's a talent issue at all. I think that it's really the mental processing of both of these quarterbacks, whether you're talking about Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. Let's say Daniel Jones is the starter going in to the last month of the season. Is he going to be able to convert a 2-minute drill? Is he going to be able to take the check down? Is he going to be able to not rely so much on his legs? I think that's another heel on this Colts offense as a whole. I think they're a little too over-reliant on the quarterback run game, the RPO options. And not only does that lead to injuries to both of your quarterbacks, but that also puts a hold on your passing game and all, because defenses are more prepared for when you do go play action off of that. They're sitting more on the run. And if you don't have a quarterback that has the accuracy deep downfield and the intermediate parts of the field to expose defenses when they're playing too tight on the run, then you're really a one-dimensional offense in a way. So it's going to be really hindered on this quarterback progression, whether it's Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. And I do think the Colts need to make a decision soon, because if not, you're probably going to have to get rid of Anthony Richardson.
Josh, I have a question for you. So I pulled up the Colts win totals on FanDuel. They have it currently set as over under 7.5 wins. Now, I'm presuming that's with them projecting Daniel Jones being a starter for at least the majority of the season, since he's pegged in to be the starter in week 1. What do you think if you're the Colts, right? And let's say that the line is set at 7.5, there's no other options. How many wins does that change by if Richardson steps in as the quarterback after like the first month? So game 5, Richardson steps in as the quarterback. Does that go up? Does that go down for you? What do you think about that?
Well, we'll have to see on the field first and foremost. But if Anthony Richardson can reach where we think he can reach in year 3 of his development, that can easily go over the win total. If you think about it, the Colts have been competitive in most of their division games, even with the roster they had the past couple of years. They've been able to split with most of the teams besides Houston. And I think 2 years ago they split with Houston. I could be wrong on this year, but they'll be competitive in their division, which is the weakest division in the NFL, and they'll be able to scrape a couple games out of that. So it's really how much can Anthony Richardson develop, because at his full potential, I mean, we've seen the flashes, whether it's him using his legs, doing amazing acrobatic shit out of the pocket, almost Cam Newton-esque, to the deep ball passes, off balance throws 70 yards downfield. It's not a question with the talent. If you can see the jump, the mental processing, the pocket presence, the intuition, if you can see all of that take just a slight step up, do you question them going over that win total in this division? I don't, but it's really dependent on both of those quarterbacks.
See, I'm looking at like this 7.5, even with Jones at quarterback or Richardson at quarterback. I think I'm going to hit the over on this, and that's the underdog line right now. It's plus 100 as opposed to minus 120 for under 7.5, because, like you said, this division is not great. You have the Titans with Cam Ward as a rookie quarterback. I'm not the most sold on him as a fit for that offensive scheme. And if we talk about the Titans later on in this series, we'll definitely dive more into that. I have a ton to talk about with the Titans. I think they're very much a polarizing team. And then you also have the Texans, who I'm on record as not being the C.J. Stroud's biggest fan, but I do still think like they're probably set to win this division and being the best quarterback in the division. I think that's probably a safe bet. And then you have the Jaguars, which are kind of the magic beans of the division, where it's like they could be good, like they were 2 years ago. They could be bad, like they were last year. It really depends on how Trevor Lawrence continues to progress. So you have a team that's in a division that has winnable games. I don't know if I agree it's the weakest division. NFC South is down there too, but I think that's a whole debate for a whole show, is like ranking the divisions.
Yeah.
But I think either quarterback, they bring something different to what this offense can do. For me, I think Jones, as a guy who can still move and is a bit more responsible with the football and a bit more accurate, like he's slightly higher floored than Richardson is at this point in their career. And him running that offense, I think, is easier for me to envision them getting 8-9 wins than it would be if Richardson wins. Richardson is what we saw as him last year. If he has taken that next step to this year, which I have no evidence to suggest he has, but if he does, then yeah, I think this is easily over that win margin. But for me, I think Richardson getting hurt and Jones being forced to be the starter was probably the best thing that could have happened to them this early in the process, because you get at least like 3 or 4 games with Jones to show like what that is. And then at that point, now you have your decision to make. And if Jones isn't shitting the bed, I don't think you turn it over to Richardson.
Yeah. Do you guys think that there's a case that any of the 4 teams in the AFC North, or excuse me, this is the AFC South, any of the 4 teams in the AFC South could win the division? Like, would it surprise you to see the Titans win the division?
With how much I respect the Texans' defense and C.J. Stroud as a quarterback, even though, like I said, I'm not the highest on him, I do think they have weapons I like. They have a quarterback that is good. They have a defense that is great. Their defensive line is a bunch of studs. So for me, it'd be surprising if anyone other than the Texans won it. I would be surprised. I can see worlds where it does happen, but surprised I would be, yes.
Got it.
I would say I'm with you. I think the Houston Texans are far and beyond the best team in this division, but I would be the most surprised if the Colts won this division out of the Jaguars or Titans. I think the Jaguars and the Titans are the two. I don't know right now. They have a lot of high potential with their draft picks, and if everything goes well, there is a case where they make a playoff push. But I think the Colts would be in the least likely of those scenarios, just because, think about it. Daniel Jones is a little bit better than what Anthony Richardson is, and kind of the same prototype mold. But we're talking about a guy that you drafted, I believe, 3rd or 4th overall, has all the talents in the world, and should be above Daniel Jones right now. If we're having this battle year 3 into this Anthony Richardson experiment, it goes to, one, how underdeveloped or how improperly they brought him in and how they rushed him into the starting spot a little bit soon, not having the right coaching under him, not being mentally ready. It just shows how shaky of this quarterback situation is, and I'm more comfortable with a rocky Trevor Lawrence or a rookie Cam Ward, in my opinion.
I can see that.
I think their quarterback situation is the worst in the division by far, like no question. Which usually correlates to wins, so I can definitely see your point there.
So I will go look something up here, but while I'm looking up, Owen, how would you interpret the Colts' defensive scheme?
So I was just looking at it, and I think to go back to the reason this series of podcasts started on Mondays was to kind of establish what the positional wants or needs or likes that these teams have, and based on what they've drafted in the past, kind of building archetypes for their positionals or positions that they like. And starting with their defensive line, obviously you have guys like Kwity Paye and Laiatu Latu who are first-round draft picks. Paye is more so in that same realm as a Samson Ibuka or Bukum that they have, or JT Tuimoloau, who they also drafted this past season. Like, these guys are heavy-handed, run-defending, compression-style rushers who are, solid when it comes to the run defense because they know what they're doing. They're smart players. They're thicker built. They can hang in there and bang with bigger offensive linemen, take on blocks better. And then you have Latu, who fell because of injuries and injury history from his time of being medically retired from football. He was probably the swing, even though he's not fitting into that strict archetype they've had with the other guys, who's more of that, we're just looking to get like a number one pass rusher type. We want a guy who can win pass rushes. So they probably saw him as a value that they could reach outside of their typical archetype to grab. And then when you're looking at D tackles, you have Buckner, Grover Stewart, Neville Gallimore, Ade Tomiwa. I've been practicing that in my head for like 5 minutes and I still messed it up. Ade Tomiwa, Adebaware, as players that are like high athletic build. Gallimore and Adebaware were both guys who were like broke the RAS scale, specifically Adebaware when he was coming out, because they're big, can move, get off the line. They kill it at the combine. And Buckner isn't a slouch when it comes to being an athlete either. And he's kind of that hybrid 5-tech, 3-tech, depending on what front you want to run. So they run with a lot of penetration, athletic players at D tackle to combine with some more compression-style rushers on the edge. And then they have some studs there as well. So, I mean, with that, and their linebackers have kind of changed over time, especially with some of their players that were kind of core elements of the defense falling off a bit. So now you have Zaire Franklin and Jalen Carleys as their starters. They picked up Cameron McGrone from the Patriots. So they definitely have more of a nickel defense, similar to what like the Bills run specifically. Like they ran, I think, nickel almost like not as much as the Bills. They ran it by a significant margin more than any other team, but they're one of those teams that are up there because they have one of the best ones in Kenny Moore as their slot corner. And they have two kind of safeties that are in that typical strong safety, free safety kind of role. They run a lot of split safety coverage. And then they brought in Tre'Davious Ward and Cam Bynum to kind of round out that secondary, and they have Jalen Jones as returning starter at corner. So you're seeing a lot of similarities to this zone or zone-heavy defense with split zone safeties, a nickel being kind of more their base defense and being in that lighter in the back seven, but having these bigger, beefier, high athletes in the front that can make disruption and allow the undersized players on the second and third levels be able to come up and make some plays when there's chaos in front of them.
Josh, how do you see the Colts defense?
I got to give it again to Chris Ballard for doing an amazing job in the draft. And then especially this year in the free agency portal, getting players that fit this defense and overall improving them. Let's be real. This was a middle of the pack to lower end defense last year. They tried to keep things in front of them, a lot of run of 2 high shells, a lot of cover 4, but they got burnt a lot of the time over the top. They weren't able to stop over the middle. And the way they're able to supplement that in free agency with both their coaches and their players really showed an emphasis on wanting to improve in that area. You hit on it, Owen, already with Tre'Davious Ward and Cam Bynum coming over on big contracts. This was a team 2 years ago that had genuinely the worst starting corner room in the NFL. Now you got Kenny Moore next to Tre'Davious Ward, Jalen Jones, Juju Brents, Justin Wally in the 3rd round. You got a good core of cornerbacks there that you can build around. And Nick Cross taking that step this year for the Indianapolis Colts, give them a solid to good secondary, safety room as well. So the secondary was the biggest issue the past couple years. That has now been fixed. For this defense that likes to rush in compression, like you just mentioned, I think they have a really good roster to do that. The penetrating run stuffer in Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, who has continued to be proven time after time again a Pro Bowl caliber defensive tackle, even on his worser years. The addition of JT Tuimoloau, Laiatu Latu last year, They're not letting Kwity Paye be the edge one anymore. They have a good rotation now. They don't have to put all that pressure onto him. I think this team is one linebacker and one solid edge rusher away from being a complete defense. I think the loss of EJ Speed last year is going to be huge for them. A lot of it's going to be put on Zaire Franklin to not only be the captain, get everybody in the right place, but play both the run and the pass at a higher level than he already does. And he's a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker just because Jalen Charles is puzzled in to be the weak side linebacker and really take that responsibility. But we've seen the Colts do this over and over again, rinse and replace with their linebacker position, bring in day 3 guys that turn into solid starters like EJ Speed. Let's hope Jalen Charles can follow that same route. But one solid edge and one linebacker away, I think this is a really well-rounded defense, and Chris Ballard did a hell of a job building them up from where they were 2 years ago.
So I'll echo Ballard being good with drafting. So every year at Draft Professor, when the wild card week happens, we dive in and we look at like the draft trends. The Colts always score well when it comes to having players they draft start for the team.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're usually in the mid-teens. So like, the Bills and the Ravens will be in, 16 to 18, and they tend to be at the top of that measurement.
Mm-hmm.
But the Colts are in the low teens, and that speaks volumes for a team that really hasn't made a good playoff push.
Yeah.
But they're able to draft players that eventually start for their team. And that's good fundamental team building. And they may not spend as much money in free agency as other teams do.
And that's why you saw both offensive linemen leaving free agency this portal, and they're able to bring in their draftees who's been sitting for a year or two and put them in as solid starters. Matt Gonzalez comes to my mind. Let me pull up their depth chart. Give me a second. Tanner Bornolini stepping in the center position. Raheem at left tackle did that a couple years ago. Braden Smith, same role. They're able to draft and develop these guys. So when they go into free agency and get $15 to $20 million contracts, they're able to rinse and replace on the offense and defensive side of the ball and go after positions like cornerback and safety where they needed to address this offseason.
Yeah. So the Colts, let's look at their defense first. So in round 2, they did JT Tuimoloau, and in round 3, they did Justin Wally. So, Owen, you had mentioned that JTT was a compression-style edge. You think he fit their scheme?
Yeah, definitely.
And Josh, how did you see JTT coming out? Like, what style of player did you see? Did you see him as, like, are you in alignment with Owen, or did you see him different?
No, he fits exactly that mold. I think he was a really good run defender coming out into the NFL level right away. Smart, intuitive, good use of hands, good lower body strength, able to hold up at the point of attack. Not the guy that's going to win with finesse, going to win with speed, but he can win with power. He can win with hand usage in pass rush scenarios. He was more underrated, kind of like Jack Sawyer, just because they didn't have the athletic thresholds, but they did a good job at Ohio State compressing the pocket, beating the right tackles with hand usage, beating the left tackles with hand usage. I would say JTT had a little bit of a down year last year, turned it off more during the playoff team, but back in 2023, he was beating Olu Fashanu in the Penn State game like it was nothing. He was having a really good year for them in the 2023 campaign. A little bit of a step back, but it shows how good of a leader he is and how good of a run stuffer he is to be on the field that much and still have that much of an impact without getting those sack numbers.
Cool. And then the next player was cornerback Justin Wally. So, Josh, did you have Wally as a boundary or a slot corner?
I had him as a slot corner, but it's a guy that's able to play both the boundary and the slot. I think a lot of people, when they look at the top 100 picks and see Justin Wally at the latter end of the third round, they're going to go, oh, holy overreach. There are so many better players on the board. And while it was a tiny bit of overreach, I love the athletic profile. I love the prospect, his mindset in total, really instinctual, able to make plays on short area of balls thrown to him, able to contribute in the run game as well. Hope he's able to learn under Kenny Moore if they do decide to move on from him in the near future and take over that starting nickel role. But no matter what, if they have injuries at that cornerback position, you got a guy that can go out there, give it its all, and is smart on his head and not going to be a cover bust like the past couple years have been for corners in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and Wally, to your point, tests well athletically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Colts draft DNA. One of the guests that comes on the channel once in a while, his name is Bill Carroll, and Bill will say that the Colts are the easiest team to predict who they draft because you just narrow it down to who has the highest RAS score at a given position, and the Colts are using a metric really similar to that. Mm-hmm. Owen, how did you see Wally, boundary, slot, and kind of what was your assessment of him?
I think for neutral scouting, you'd say probably he benefits the most by being in the slot, just because he's a bit undersized, not as much length as you like for the outside corner. But he does have quick twitch, and he can step up in the run game, stuff you really want from your slots. However, the reason I brought up kind of the comparison to the Bills defense when it comes to the Colts defense is that they're not afraid to get these 5'10", sub 190-pound corners that can go out there, and if they have this sense and zone ability to take away leverage, and you don't need them to be these long, lengthy press man corners who can deal with physicality because they're staying in a receiver's hip pocket and trying to make sure they can disrupt timing off the line of scrimmage. Like, you don't need that when you're working this Colts defense. They're more focused on zone drops, rallying tackle, making sure that they're taking away throwing lanes before the ball is out, as opposed to squeezing guys and making it so the throwing lanes are, taking away throwing lanes after the ball is out, as opposed to squeezing the catch point and making it more difficult for that throw to be made in the first place, like it is in man. There's different ways that you can benefit, pros or cons for that. But for a defense like that the Colts do run, a guy like Wally can play boundary corner for you. And if I was to then flip and put a filter on my draft projections for players, and you ask me, put a filter on your draft prospects at corner, and you're doing it for the Indianapolis Colts, a lot of guys I would have said are probably slot corners, then become potentially outside corners for now when you're drafting them. They're not exclusively like slot only players, like what you would say if you were doing it in a neutral perspective.
Okay, and the Colts had two other defensive draft picks, defensive tackle Tim Smith and Hunter Wohler. And I want to spend a minute on Hunter Wohler. So on the site that I'm on, they list Hunter Wohler as a linebacker. So I know on the draft simulator, he was a safety. So my question, Josh, Hunter Wohler, linebacker or safety? And then how do you like him with the Colts?
Ideally, you would want him at safety, even though it's contrary to what his athletic profile says. But the Colts are in a scenario where he might be forced to play linebacker early on in his career. And that's not something I'm scared of. It's a prototypical height, weight, speed kind of guy for the linebacker position, translating over from safety. Not as freakish as James Williams last year, but more compact, can play more in the second level towards the line of scrimmage. He can contribute in the run game. He has the size, he has the nuance in tackling, he has the fundamentals down. He's not going to be able to range sideline to sideline, which is something that's going to deteriorate him a little bit, but coverage is obviously going to be good coming from the safety position, giving him less responsibility, being able to roam the middle of the field, but he can also serve as a quarterback spy. And I think that's what the Colts are going to attend a little bit of what they're going to try to do with him, if they're going to put him in that linebacker role, or if they want a run stuffing smaller guy that can contain the edge a little bit, they'll be able to move him around from place to place. But he might be forced to play a lot of linebacker early on in his career. And he does have the profile to play linebacker.
So,
Owen, how about you? What did you have on Hunter Wohler?
So I just pulled up his positional snaps for his last year at Wisconsin here. And when looking at it, so he played 315 snaps in the box, which is technically like strong safety / linebacker. And then looking where he's playing more in like some space coverages, which is slot corner and free safety, he's at 358. So about even, give or take like 30-ish snaps. And if you threw in his snaps at wide corner, it gets even closer or a little farther, I mean. But for me, I think when you're looking at a player like this, you brought in Cam Bynum, who wasn't great for Minnesota last year. Like I think we all can agree that Minnesota's weakness last year on defense was their secondary. So they bring in a guy as a Band-Aid option to be that strong safety, a free safety combo pair with Nick Cross. And Nick Cross, while he is better as like I think a traditional strong safety where he can fly down with the ball and attack, and even though he has the athleticism, he's a lot more aggressive. I do think he could be more likely to flex over to a free safety spot in the future if you do like Waller as a true strong safety. I think his position, year one, if he's going to make an impact as a rookie for this Colts defense, it's if they want to run more dime looks, he could be their dime linebacker, where you're not surrendering as much when it comes to run defense when you're putting 6 DBs on the field and taking only one linebacker and putting them out there. So because he has experience playing as a linebacker, he can bang a little bit on the inside, not as much as like a 250-pound guy like Cameron McGrone, but he can come in and be someone who can also flex to be covering tight ends and being able to hold his own in that way. So I think that's his best projection to make it on the field in year one, with some upside to eventually hit as a strong safety player down the road for them if he develops, or even if they want to go more, if like as Kenny Moore ages, they want to phase more out of true nickel and go with maybe a big nickel look. He could be their big nickel player as well. I'm not sure. Kenny Moore got an extension recently, I think in the last year or two, so I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. But I do think that he gives them variability on their defense of whether or not they want to bring size but not lose out on as much coverage potential as they would with other options on their team.
Okay, and let's flip over to the Colts offense. And I want to talk about 2 guys from day 3. So they drafted Jalen Travis in round 4 and DJ Giddens in round 5. Which of those 2 players did you like most, Owen?
Between Travis and Giddens? I think Giddens, for me, I think has a bit more impact right away. The offensive line for the Colts is something that I think is going to be trouble to crack as a rookie. And for me, Travis has that upside eventually if he wants to develop into that. But for me, I think Giddens was someone who, especially getting drafted into his position where he's behind a top back like Jonathan Taylor and can be more of that, change of pace, bring him in, hit some of those other runs that maybe you don't want to, you want to save Taylor from having to do. I think that is something that excites me specifically as him as an addition for this offense for the Colts. So I do think I'd go with Giddens there, but it's not like I'm super high on either of these players. I wasn't super high on either of them in the draft cycle, but I think Giddens has the opportunity to excel where I had him originally, specifically in this offense that's going to be more of a run-heavy scheme, especially if Daniel Jones is there. He's going to be more traditional running the football. I think Giddens will have a good chance to get some pop and flash in that offense.
And Josh, how about you? Between Travis and Giddens, who is higher on your board?
So Giddens was a 4th-round prospect to me. Jalen Travis was a 5th-round prospect to me. So Giddens was a little bit higher, but I'll hit on Jalen Travis for a second because I think he's in a great scenario in this Indianapolis Colts organization to start in a couple years with the proper development. And we've seen them develop their 2nd and 3rd round guys, their day 3 guys in the starting roles, but also to be a 6 offensive lineman right away. A guy that really impressed at the Senior Bowl, has a really big frame on him, doesn't lose the leverage battle often with that frame, which is really impressive. He's able to get that knee bend, get down in his base. If he improves his mobility a little bit, he'll be able to anchor down in the run game and move people off the line of scrimmage. His play strength is not a question. But in those short yard scenarios, those goal line scenarios, you can see Jalen Travis coming in as a 6 offensive lineman and really get them over the edge in those 3rd and short scenarios, whether they want to hand it off to Jonathan Taylor or do that quarterback option with Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. So I think there's a real path for him to see some time right away. And I think he's their best backup tackle that they have right now. Somebody you rather prefer on the right side of the line, but could play left tackle if need be due to injury. But I like that's the scenario that Jalen Travis is in with this team.
Okay, so let's kind of put a bow on the Colts, and we are going to pivot to the Los Angeles Chargers.
Well, real quick, Jim, just to shout out real quick, we jumped past. So talking about the receivers, you got undrafted free agent Coleman Owen there. You know where he's from, University of Ohio, Maction baby. So just throwing back to our Monday show, can't overlook the Mac boys, baby.
No, not a problem. Actually, so that Mac show is actually like there's a lot of people that watch that, Owen. I was impressed with the number of people that were tuning into. I mean, you covered like 15 sleepers there, right? The number of people that have watched that was significantly higher than I expected. So
I'm glad. Smaller school prospects need to be need to get some attention outside of just like if they get invited to the Senior Bowl. We saw like last year with like Dolak, he didn't get invited to anything, and the only reason why people talked about him was because he was an All-American. So I'm glad that went as well as I thought it would go.
Okay. So the Los Angeles Chargers, let's start with their offense. Oh, and how would you describe their offensive scheme?
So it's a Jim Harbaugh offense, right? So they're going to want to run the ball. They bring in running backs every year. Last year they had who was it? The Dobbins from Ohio State, the Ravens, who was originally from Ohio State. They had players that like Harbaugh knew from Michigan, like with Hassan Haskins. This year they're bringing in. They have Kamani Vidal, Haskins still on the roster, but they also brought in Najee Harris as a free agent, or Amarian Hampton as a first-round draft pick. So they load up on backs that like multiple guys that can take handoffs in the NFL and like be like with Haskins and Vidal, probably not as much, but Harris was a volume rusher for the Steelers. Even when he was splitting time with Warren, he was still getting upwards of 1,000 yards each season. And Hampton is this bigger body, like 6'3", can run like the wind, like player. So he complements Harris well and has the upward potential to eventually take over as like the lead back in that offense. So you may think of like the Chargers with Justin Herbert, and they have Mike Williams back. Ladd McConkey was a standout wide receiver. Imagine not thinking he'd be good as an outside receiver / slot hybrid player. Couldn't be me. But they have a bunch of guys who can catch the football and a quarterback who can throw it, but they are going to establish that run first. They can run more power options. They have bigger bodied guys like Zion Johnson. They brought in Mekhi Becton as a guard, who's this massive human being. And then they have two tackle studs in Alt and Slater who can do a lot of different things when it comes to blocking different schemes and being some more of the versatile tackle prospects we've seen in recent years. So you have an offense that's really well balanced and I think is primed to take a next step, especially if McConkey and Herbert continue their trajectory they were on. Quentin Johnston is there, and Mike Williams coming back, giving another big body target that isn't Quentin Johnston to kind of complement McConkey. I do like a lot of what they have when it comes to their passing game, but they also are going to be able to run the football down your throat. So you can't devote your defense to one side of the ball or one side of the play calling or the other.
And from like a running game standpoint, do you see it as a power running game, outside zone, inside zone?
I think for me, I think they're going to run a lot more power gaps stuff than zone, just from the running backs they have currently on the roster and some of the, like I said, the bigger, beefier interior guys they have with Zion Johnson, Mekhi Becton, brought in Bradley Bozeman. So they're gonna want to punch you in the mouth. They have Najee Harris, who runs a lot better when it comes to those gap schemes, waiting for holes to open up and then hitting that, but not being like the big, play getter. You have Hampton to do that, so you can always run some off-pace stuff when you run zone. You're going to run a mix of both, but for me, I think it's going to be a lot of setting up some more power running and then play action off of that with Herbert being able to push the ball down the field or hit McConkey in the slot if they end up clearing out and having the linebackers sucked in.
So, Josh, how would you describe the Chargers' offensive scheme?
Cautiously optimistic, point blank period. It would be one thing to say that this team has a Super Bowl outlook right now, but the truth is that they don't. And I'm not going to put all the blame on Greg Roman because I think he did a good job year one on changing this system around, building it as more of a run-first offense, working play action off of it. But with the combinations of running backs that they have and how they get over-reliant on the run at times, I think they're going to be a little bit too power-heavy this year, if that makes any sense to you guys. They have Najee and both Amarian Hampton, and while I love the selection of Amarian Hampton, I think he can be a top 10 running back in the NFL. I think Greg Roman's going to revert a little bit back to early Lamar days, which I don't think he should. He has all the weapons around him, but getting in those heavy formations, using the fullback often and running the ball 35, 40 times a game, which is it's successful. We saw the Eagles this year be a predominantly run team, both quarterback and running back, and win the Super Bowl. A lot of these teams that were competing towards the end were predominantly run teams that had amazing passing off of it. I'm just a little scared that they're going to work too many deep passes and not work the short to underneath stuff with these wide receivers. Ladd McConkey is basically their only reliable short target as of now, and we know that they like to run McConkey's on those double moves off play action, lining him up as an outside receiver at times. But Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, both on this roster, both bigger body type receivers, and then Trey Harris as well was a boundary X prototype coming out of the draft. Love Trey Harris as a prospect, but I think they're overloading too much on the deep passing attack, and I hope Greg Roman proves me wrong on this, but seeing this as a lot of years as a Baltimore Ravens fan, and then the first year of Justin Herbert, we saw it in the playoffs. They got a little too over-reliant on the run. Once Houston stopped that up, all the passing attacks were deep downfield or out intermediate routes, and Houston was just sitting on that and picking Justin Herbert off, whether it's his fault or not. Some of those were, but you can't put it all on him. I think Justin Herbert has shown you he has taken that step in that offense. I think the offensive line and Jim Harbaugh's philosophy has shown to taking that step in the culture in the running game. I'm just scared they're going to be a little bit one-dimensional in the passing and running game this year.
So Josh, I forget we're in the same. I have a support group you can call. It's called the teams that had Greg Roman as an offensive coordinator support group. We're going to be accepting a lot of Chargers fans now, but like as a Bills and Ravens fan, we know all too well how he is with his play calling and restricting it that way. And like they brought in Tyler Conklin. I'm a bit more optimistic for the underneath concepts because they have a guy like Tyler Conklin. They drafted Oronde Gadsden that can maybe work the middle of the field a bit more if they want to run a lot of two tight end stuff. Mm-hmm. But like they have two tight ends at Disley and Conklin. They have a 300-pound fullback. They're going to try to run it down your throat first and foremost, and that's the Greg Roman special.
And I was going to add that in, but yeah, the whole like Greg Roman support group thing, that's real. So I have a high amount of respect for the running games that Greg Roman has established.
Oh, absolutely.
The Bills offense that he had done nothing before he arrived. And they had an identity in somewhere between Greg Roman and Shady McCoy. That offense hummed, and I don't know that Rex Ryan, as a head coach, ever had a running game as good as the one that he had with Greg Roman in Buffalo.
Oh, no denying that. Greg Roman is a top 3, whether you like it or not, run game coordinator in the NFL. He's shown it time after time. I mean, let's be real. Lamar Jackson wouldn't be the quarterback he is today without Greg Roman easing him into the NFL and running all those fancy gap concepts, those duos, those diamond backfields, running the both quarterback run and power game to perfection. But we've seen it as well. Once he gets into the passing game, he gets a little bit one-dimensional on the deep passes, the underneath stuff, and the intermediate route concepts. They're not as crisp. They're not as clean. The timing seems to be off on a lot of those pass plays, whether that's Greg Roman's fault, the quarterback's fault, the receivers, the timing, whatever it is, he gets a little bit one-dimensional in the passing game. And then we've seen it once teams get to that level, and I think the Chargers are going to start to get to that level this year where the talent shows that they should be better where they finish in the year. I think people are going to start to look at this passing game and start to ask questions, not necessarily on Herbert, but what plays are being called and if they need to change something up to get to that next level.
Do you think there's going to be – so I was just looking at the monstrosity that is this quarterback room they have because they have Herbert, obviously, but they also have Heineke as the primary backup. And then they have Trey Lance from Dallas and then DJ Uiagalelei from college, which I didn't even know he got picked up by any team. But do you think – similar to what they did with Flacco in Baltimore, do you think that there may be some packages where Trey Lance comes in, takes some direct snaps, becomes more of an element of this running game, and is that a way for him to like beat out Heineke as a backup quarterback? Because like the way Greg Roman runs his offense is, for me, Trey Lance being mobile and being able to push the ball down the field is like if he was the calling the shots, he would have been his draft pick there. So I'm wondering if he's going to try to find ways to get him on the field as their third string, maybe even pushing Heineke for the backup quarterback there.
I think you'll see it sprinkled in. I go back to RG3 when he was the backup quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. They did that a little bit, sprinkle him from there. But we've seen Jim Harbaugh's like media outbursts of how much he's supportive of Justin Herbert, all behind Justin Herbert. I don't know if he'd be the type of person to sub Herbert out for a player or two. I think they would run those quarterback plays and get those quarterback options at a less rate, but to keep Justin Herbert a more than capable quarterback at running and executing those on the field, I think they'll start to do that. But I think it might give Trey Lance the edge over Taylor Heineke in the backup quarterback position, because in early media videos that we've seen of Jim Harbaugh and Trey Lance chopping it up, I think Jim Harbaugh is the type of coach that could get Trey Lance in a scenario where he could be a capable backup, and he has all the talents and traits, just like his scouting report, to ascend once he starts getting playing time. This is still a very raw quarterback 4 years into his NFL career, but I do like the matching of Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, and Trey Lance all together. I do think he ends up the backup quarterback for this team.
So let's look at a portion of the Chargers' offensive draft. So I'm going to read off Trey Harris, wide receiver from Ole Miss. I believe that was a round 2 pick, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then a little bit later, Keandre Lambert-Smith, wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking to see what round that was. I think that was a round 5 pick. And then a Rondé Gadsden, also in round 5.
Mm-hmm.
So what do those 3 picks, are they the same types of players that were there? Or do you think that there's a shift? Josh?
I would say, now, give Joey Ortiz a lot of credit. He's done a really good job these past 2 years thrusting into the general manager role and putting a lot of talent around Justin Herbert in this team and drafting guys in day 3, like last year, especially Tarheeb Still, Cam Hart, to contribute to your secondary right away. His hits on day 3 have been really good, and I'm going to give him the benefit on the doubt on his day 3 picks here, because there was a lot of highs on my board and a lot of lows. Kyle Kennard, defensive player, will go over him on the defensive side of the ball. Really good value for his pick. But Keandre Lambert-Smith felt like a little bit of a reach just because they're looking for more of that Z-type receiver, the guy that worked the middle routes. And if you look at this roster, he's the only receiver that kind of fits that role. But at Auburn, he was mostly used as a boundary X type of guy. But he does have the shiftiness to play those intermediate routes. I think that was more of a need just for that wide receiver room. I think Rondé Gadsden II is in an amazing scenario with this coaching staff, this support group behind him. I think he's in the best scenario to develop. If he stays healthy, this could be a starting caliber tight end in the NFL. I think Joey Ortiz hit it out of the park with that pick. And then Branson Taylor, the guard that they drafted, another one trying to fill a little bit of a need in that interior offensive line room, and also a special teams player as well, holding up on field goals as well. I feel as if that was a little bit of a reach, but both Keandre Lambert-Smith and Branson Taylor were both picks and fits of need for this team, really just trying to fill slots on their offense where they need just a little bit of help or bodies in a room.
And Owen, how about you, between Gadsden, Lambert-Smith, and Trey Harris? Do the types of players they are, do you think they fit the scheme, or do you think they're needed because they didn't have a player of that type there already?
I think, okay, so with Harris, I think he's going to fit a lot more into that Mike Williams mold, being more a contested catch guy. That was what I really liked about him. When we did our wide receivers episode a few months back, I had him in the top 5 when it comes to a contested catch player out of that wide receiver core in the draft, because he is able to box out, kind of win like a basketball player in the red zone. And he's able to attack down the field despite being a bigger bodied guy and not having a ton of speed, because he's able to go up and win these opportunities down the field when it's even in tight coverage. So he doesn't create a lot of separation, but he does go up and attack it. I can cover that question in a second when I get done with this one, Jim. But for like him, so I think he's their eventual Mike Williams replacement. In a world where he develops enough. With Lambert-Smith, I think, as Josh was saying, he covered it really well, how they want more of a Z receiver. Quentin Johnston hasn't really been that for them. They hoped he would be an X, then they hoped maybe he could fail to being the Z, and just hasn't been that. Lambert-Smith could bring more of a speed element while still having size and be another guy who kind of complements McConkey in being able to stretch the field a bit and still have some size in comparison to what else they have with Harris, Williams, etc. And in Gadsden, they have like a spectrum at tight end, with Disley being more of a blocking type player. I'm not really super high on him as a receiver. Conklin, another guy who can block, but he's a bit better of a receiver than Disley is. And then Gadsden is basically a supersized slot, where he's going to be the player that they're hoping maybe develops as their tight end too, so they can run a lot of 2 tight end stuff but not have to worry about not having a receiving option coming out of that. Maybe Conklin's just like a band-aid option for them there, and maybe Gadsden can eventually progress into that. So I do think that they have brought guys in where you can see the pathway that they want them to develop to. It's just more so that they have players there already with Johnston from Lambert Smith, Williams for Harris, and then Conklin for Gadsden that fill the roles that they're hoping to develop into, which is a good team building practice because you don't want to draft guys with intention from you fill roles for you, and then they have to do it immediately if you don't think they're ready for it. You have guys there that can have the starting roles pinned down, and then those guys can then compete to beat them out for it.
And then did you want to handle the Gennaro at left guard?
Yeah. So this is actually really easy. This is really easy for me because if Bradley Bozeman doesn't work out at left guard, which, I mean, that's a very good chance. I don't think he was a particularly awesome player for Carolina. I think they have Andre James as a backup center. He could definitely have some flexibility going to guard coming over from the Raiders. But for me, my favorite option for that would be putting Jamari Sawyer at left guard. He was a guy who I had like a 4th round grade on, who played tackle at Georgia, but probably projected better to be as a guard. And then he played admirably as their tackle replacing, I can't remember if it was Slater that got hurt or if he was just the opposite of Slater when they didn't really have an option outside of that. So he played fine at tackle, and I do think he is an ascending younger offensive lineman for them. So if anything, if Bozeman doesn't pan out, even though they have Branson Taylor as like their direct backup left guard option on this depth chart I'm looking at, I do think Sawyer could be someone that can step in and be that starting left guard, and I have some optimism that he could get that job and hold it after that and be an answer for them.
Cool. So let's pivot to the Chargers defense. Josh, how would you describe the Chargers defensive scheme?
2 words: Jesse Minter. This is one of the few defensive teams in the NFL that their coaching staff has outplayed the talent on the defensive side of the ball. Now, don't get me wrong. There's still very good players on this team. Derwin James has been a perennial Pro Bowl safety for the past 10 years of his career. Khalil Mack is still playing at a really high level going into his mid-30s. They got Tui Tuipulotu, who stepped in a big role and is now going to be taking over as that starting left outside linebacker over Joey Bosa, who got let go to Buffalo in free agency. But when you look at Jesse Minter stepping in year one, especially with the secondary room that they had, compiled of mostly day 3 picks that were unproven, Cam Hart and Taheeb Still, plus with Aloy Gilman being a solid safety, he really elevated them into being more than just a quality defense. And there's not really like a catalyst for this. They're just really well coached. They sit on all the in-breaking routes. They sit on all the out-breaking routes. They're making plays on the ball. They're all firing on run defense. This is a total team effort, team collective. Yeah, they run every scheme. They run man and zone equally. I think this is one of the more man-friendly teams in the league. They're not afraid to run it. They're not afraid to go press man in your face, leaving Derwin James at free safety or letting him roam in an all-out blitz. I think this defense is multiple, can line up in many different fronts, but ultimately, it's Jesse Minter and how disciplined they are in both run and pass that takes them over the top for me, which was very impressive year one coming over from Michigan for Jesse Minter.
Oh, and how about you? How would you describe the Chargers defense?
This is your stereotypical 3-4 multiple front defense where you have your 5 techs in, I mean, Naquan Jones was a pickup for them, but Adio, Agbania, Deshaun Hand, I think, is a good ad for Miami. He's been like in this kind of 5. He's really a 5 tech, but had to play some more even front looks and inside at D tackle for Miami these past few years. So I think he'll be a good player for them. And then they brought in Jamari Caldwell as like a nose tackle for them specifically. So they have the players to run that 3-man front if they want to. Moving to the linebackers, Khalil Mack has been like the prototype for being this 3-4 outside linebacker pass rusher. There was that year he made the Pro Bowl as both a linebacker and an edge rusher, or in some combination of that. He made All-Pro at one and Pro Bowl at the other. I can't remember when he was on the Raiders. But he's a player that is like the prototype for that type of player. And I think Tuipulotu, I was not a fan of his coming out of USC, but with him taking over for Joey Bosa, I think he fits a lot better as a 3-4 outside linebacker pass rusher than Bosa ever could have, specifically just because how they're built. I think Bosa fits a lot better as like an even front edge rusher, not someone who has to stand up and drop in coverage on occasion. I think Tuipulotu will do that a lot better. And for me, they went from drafting one of the guys that I didn't really have a lot of love for in Tuipulotu to like my favorite linebacker in that draft when they drafted Diane Henley out of Washington State, former safety convert. He's like Derwin James if he was a bit bigger, so like he had to play linebacker. Now, obviously, Derwin James is a much better athlete, much better player. But what I'm saying is like similar type where they're this linebacker safety hybrid. One is slightly smaller and plays the safety position. One is slightly bigger and plays the linebacker. So you can get a lot of multiple fronts with that. And Henley is an ascending player, especially because he's new to the position. He's not going to be setting up as one of their starting middle linebackers. Next to him will be Colson or Perryman. Colson being one of the old Michigan guys that Minter and Harbaugh are familiar with. So you have this front that has a ton of players that could be multiple, rush from different angles, and has a ton of people I think are higher upside. And then you even look at like some of the backups, Troy Dye, Kyle Kennard, Bud Dupree, players that fit this style of defense well and have some upside there. And then as Josh was saying, they are very multiple in the secondary as well, capable of running more man because they have the athletes back there and have the big physical presence, but they can also be the structured and disciplined is the word I'm looking for, because Minter and Harbaugh are such good coaches when it comes to coaching that up, that you think that they can throw a bunch of stuff at you and you don't really know what to really game plan for. They're going to be able to ones putting you on the back foot, having to make adjustments as opposed to the other way around.
And Josh, we touched on Kyle Kennard a few minutes ago, but do you want to dive in a little bit as to where you had Kennard on your draft board and how you see him fitting in with the Chargers?
Yeah, no, he was a top 100 player for me. I think he sat 77th on my big board, so ran the third round. I think he was one of the premium talents in day 3, and Joey Ortiz did a really good job identifying that, because this is a team that did lose Joey Bosa in the offseason. So you had the comfortability of Khalil Mack, Tui Pelotu, and Joey Bosa being a really good combination off the edge for you. Now you supplement that with Kyle Kennard, who's able to play the run really well, has good use of hands, and really wins with his arm length instead of speed and finesse. But that's kind of like that fits in a Harbaugh defense. He's not going to ask that type of speed and athleticism off the edge from a guy that's just going to be a rotational guy and be a damn good one at that. And Bud Dupree bringing in that veteran presence to help develop a guy along the same archetype, same profile, wins with more power, wins with more leverage, hand usage. I think Bud Dupree and Khalil Mack are going to be really good for Kyle Kennard's development. And let's see if he takes a leap like Tui Pelotu did from his rookie year, being a jolt for that defensive line, getting multiple sack numbers, because we saw it against quality competition. Kyle Kennard can't get home and get to the quarterback. It's how effective his rushes are, how multiple his rushes are, but because you know how good of a run defender he is already at the next level.
And Owen, how about you? Where did you have Kennard on your board?
Chargers and taking edge rushers that I am just lower than the consensus is something that I'm apparently getting a trend here. I was definitely not a fan of Kennard as much as Josh was. I had him as like I had him in that day 3, but right about where he got drafted. To be honest with you, I think he was perfect value for where they got him. For me, I do agree that I think his strengths came in run defending. And if you're looking at a player like Tui Pelotu is set to be like the starter there, but I think they liked having the ability to move him around and rush from like inside leverages off in the linebacker position and really using him as more of a defensive chess piece. And I think Kennard being a guy that I don't really see a ton of pass rush upside for, but can be someone who rotates in and bangs in the run game and is a bigger body guy off the edge, especially for a 3-4 outside linebacker. I felt like when I was watching him, I didn't think he could physically hold up as an even front edge, but as a 3-4 guy who comes in, is working in a bit more space and then can use his hands and his length, I do think he profiles best for this. So I would expect to see him as more of the early down guy and Tui Pelotu to come in and be more of a pass rushing specialist type player like he's been in the years past when they had Mack as the starter with Bosa. So I don't think they're getting away from what they ran with a lot last year with Tui Pelotu. I think Kennard opens that up more so for them. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of him as a player, I do think in this system, in this spot he was picked to be in, it benefits him more so than a lot of other places I had him going or trying to neutrally scout him for.
Okay. So do any of you have anything that you want to add on any of the Chargers draft picks? We didn't necessarily talk about all of them, but we have spoke about most of them.
I'll hit on RJ Mickens real quick before we get out of here. I think he was one of those day 3 safeties that you really look at the athletic traits and how instinctual he is on the ball in the air. And I think that really shined in his profile, scouting profile. And he's in a really good scenario to kind of be the next Aloy Gilman in a way, just one of those day 3 guys that comes through the ranks, get rotational snaps, and proves with his athleticism on the field and his IQ and toughness that he's able to play at the NFL level and get significant snaps from day one. He's going to be able to line up in that nickel position if you need him to, but I like him as that deep cover 3 safety, cover 1 safety, covering the deep part of the field. For someone a little bit undersized, just like Aloy Gilman, I think his instincts on the ball and the ability to get those big-time interceptions are going to be a really big thing for R.J. Mickens to earn quality playing time early on in his career.
Owen, did you want to add anything on any of the draft picks?
I think for me, one of the biggest, so I talked up their defensive front a little bit. It was the front 3. I think Hand will be solid for them. And their other 2 players there are kind of okay. I wouldn't go over the moon for them specifically. But for me, the rookie I think that could make the biggest impact for this team outside of Caldwell or maybe one of the receiving options, or not Caldwell, Hampton, is Jamari Caldwell as that nose tackle, where he, as a nose tackle prospect, he has a ton of what you want to see there. So having him land in a defense where that's a main position that you're going to need, especially with this defense that historically has missed on D-tackle picks, has struggled to defend the run up the middle. You now are in this Harbaugh system doing better at that than you have in years past. But I think you're still looking for that guy in your big 3 guys up front, not just the edge rushers we talked about. All their talent is in that perimeter edge rushing. The front 3 is where you're going to see solid starters, but you really don't have that dude up front. And I think Caldwell is the closest thing we have to being maybe an impact starter for them of their draft class, with a position that they could potentially need that at the most.
Okay. So I do want to address one question. So are any of us a Chargers fan? No. We are analyzing every NFL team. We have a podcast like this every Wednesday. I think this is the 4th one that we've done for the AFC. Thursdays, we have 2 other podcasters doing the NFC teams. And I believe by the end of July, we'll have covered all 32 teams. But specifically, we have podcasts on this channel every night. The only difference is who you see behind the camera. But that being said, Owen, do you want to tell our audience when you're behind the camera and where to find all your other content?
Yeah, so as Jim was saying, we do podcasts every night here, and we've been doing this one on Wednesdays for the past month or so, where we're covering different teams or schemes or depth charts. I'm on this one on Wednesdays. When it gets to the regular season in both NFL and college football, I will still be on Wednesday nights covering draft prospects of D tackles and edges, scouting them, giving you my profiles on them. Other than that, on Mondays right now, I'm on covering summer scouting, going through and analyzing different teams to see, prep you guys for who's going to be available for the 2026 draft from these specific teams. Unless we're doing a full conference like we did last week, where we talked about the MAC baby. Still one of my favorite episodes I've ever done on this show. But outside of being on here on the Draft Press, you can find me on Twitter at Weekly Huddle, and you can also find me over at YouTube at Weekly Huddle. I have a series which a player we have on this team we're talking about now with the Chargers and Jalen Reagor. I'm discussing players that maybe were iconic busts or iconic steals, or notorious for that. Not iconic is not the word I was looking for, but I go through and I break down their film and give them a scouting report as if I was watching them for the upcoming 2026 draft class and tell you, is this a player that the tape matches what happens in their career, or were they a much better player and just something else may have happened that caused them to spin out with that or exceed expectations? So that's one of the big projects I'm working on now. One of the other draft professors, Newt, is posting his top 10 rankings for player positions for the 2026 draft class and summer scouting over there, as well as I'm now starting apparently a crusade to regulate the NHL draft. I'm bleeding over some of my hockey content onto my football channel, where I have a fight I'm willing to die going down with the ship with, because the NHL draft is stupid. We think that the NFL draft has some problems when it comes to eligibility and who can come into the draft. Now, the NHL is significantly worse. So I just put up a rant up on Monday night after we got done with our podcast, Jim. So I'd cover a bunch of stuff over there. But yeah, definitely a lot of focus on scouting, drafting, things like that.
I heard Owen's rant on the NHL draft before a podcast on Monday. I am definitely going to check that out on his channel. I don't know how long the rant is, but it's moderately. It was moderately funny before the podcast. So if I get to listen to like a whole rant, that would probably offer additional entertainment.
It's like 10, 12 minutes of me just going in on why it's a good idea and why the negatives would not make sense to be negatives.
Josh, would you like to let our audience know how they can find you?
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at juice_T23. You're going to get more content during the college football season from me. I'm just showing up on Wednesdays here, giving you guys the weekly reports on the AFC for the summer. And then once we get back into the fall, you'll get me on Mondays again. We're going to be going over the weekly news for college football, the high-profile prospects, the big games, everything you need to know going into the next week with a recap of the previous week of college football. We'll have you there on Mondays on the NFL Draft Fanatic podcast. So make sure to give a follow and like to this podcast on Twitter, X, YouTube, Twitch, Spotify, as well as the Weekly Huddle podcast as well for the weekly content over on Owen's channel. So you're going to get daily content from us here. You're going to get content from Owen on his side and over here. If you're looking for draft content 24/7, no better place than the Draft Professor.
Yeah. So Midlife, I'll get to your question on J.K. Dobbins in a minute. So you can follow the channel, as Josh said, at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. It is the same on X as it is on YouTube. The best thank you can give if you like the content is to hit the subscribe on YouTube, please, and thank you. So we have daily draft content on this channel 12 months a year. So there are 22 people like Owen and Josh that are helping pump this content out. So as Josh said, his normal time slot is Mondays. Things got screwed up in the summer. He shows up on Wednesdays and life is all good. But you'll normally catch Josh on Mondays, and he's got a partner, Jake, that he podcasts with on Mondays on the channel. We got different podcasters Tuesday. We have different podcasters Wednesday. Owen mentioned Newt. So Owen and Newt, this is their normal time slot. Newt actually just recorded his top 10 for the draft literally the hour before we went live here. And that's already available on Spotify. And you will see pieces of that air Saturday and Sunday night. So the focus of the channel is the draft. This is about the only time of the year that we cover NFL teams because we're evaluating, for example, did our scouting report on Kyle Kennard match the scheme that he was drafted to for the Chargers? Like, I think Kyle Kennard is a great example. I think Jamari Caldwell is another, right? We have him profile draft as a nose tackle. Did he get drafted by a team that needs a nose tackle and uses him? So that's kind of what we're doing on Wednesdays and Thursdays in the months of June and July. So hit that subscribe, daily draft content coming. Tomorrow is actually the first mock draft on the channel. So that's what we're doing tomorrow night. Friday, we're breaking down some quarterbacks. Monday, I believe it's Georgia, right? Yep. So Monday, they're breaking down the entire draft class at the University of Georgia. Tuesday, they're breaking down the entire draft class at Texas A&M. So if you're interested in who's coming out in the draft, we have been podcasting that for about the last 6 weeks, and we've got a whole summer left. So we're having a lot of fun. I'm having the time of my life doing this. So that being said, what do we think about J.K. Dobbins leaving? Personally, I'm always a fan of you let the running back walk. When in doubt, you draft a running back, you don't extend them. There's minor exceptions to that. But Josh, Dobbins was in Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
So what did you think of Dobbins?
You're right, because he has a running back. Even though coming back off of a comeback player of the year, he had a really successful last year with Los Angeles on a 1-year deal. You have to move on from the running backs. They're going to get deals elsewhere. He's on the wronger side of age. The injury history isn't on his side. But if I was Los Angeles, I would rather have J.K. Dobbins and Amarion Hampton be my 1-2 punch opposed to Najee Harris and Amarion Hampton. For the reasons I mentioned earlier, I think Najee fits more of that power gap scheme that Jim Harbaugh loves to run. We saw it at Michigan. We saw it at his time in San Francisco. I think they're going to push that on to Justin Herbert and Los Angeles even more this year. And I think J.K. Dobbins, that loss takes away the inside and outside zone element of that offense, that screen game part of that offense. I think Amarion Hampton can fill in the screen game and the dump down game, but I think J.K. Dobbins was more shifty in the open field, better hands, better natural pass catcher. I think he just, that speed, that elusiveness, that breakaway ability, the ability to run an inside outside zone. I think Greg Roman and the Chargers are going to miss that more than they think. But Najee Harris is more than a capable runner. Do not get me wrong.
Owen, how about you?
So I couldn't have the more opposite opinion than Josh had on that one there. Not that J.K. Dobbins wasn't a bad pickup for them last year. Obviously, he had a great season. And I do think he can be a valuable piece to, I don't know, has Dobbins been signed by anybody yet this offseason?
Denver on a 1-year deal.
Okay, yeah. So I think he can be useful. And I mean, Denver they've got a loaded backfield too, so I'll see how much action he gets there. But for me, I think it's a smart move for the Chargers to move on from Dobbins and go with Najee over him. You're not getting any younger at the position specifically, but I think for me, it all comes down to, that the Chargers are going to run that power scheme. Like, yes, it's going to feed into them, maybe overutilizing it a bit, like you were saying, Josh. But I think they have a set. They have a set of what they want to do, like how much they do actually want to run it. And you have a player in Najee who not only can run that well and probably a bit better than Dobbins can, even though he doesn't have the shiftiness or the ability to hit those outside runs as he does, but he can run the power scheme that they're going to want to run effectively. He hasn't been nearly as hurt as Dobbins has been. Like, Dobbins was healthy for 13 games last season, started 11, but like the year before that, he only played 1 in Baltimore. He played 8 the year before in Baltimore, missed the whole 2021 season. So he's been historically banged up. You got a rare year where he only got hurt for a couple games last year, 4 specifically, but not half the season. So you're getting a guy who runs your system well, who is less likely to get hurt and has produced in a system like that. And then if you're worried about losing kind of that impact, bigger play ability at running backs, that's why you go and draft Amarion Hampton in the first round. So, like, yes, Najee Harris is going to be your between the tackles power grinder guy on your first and second downs, but you're going to have Amarion Hampton coming off the bench, providing that explosiveness that J.K. Dobbins previously had brought to this offense. So I think you're getting healthier at your running back 1A position, and then you're not losing a step athletically in the room because your running back 1B now is even probably a better athlete overall when coming into height, weight, speed, looking at it that way than J.K. Dobbins was in Amarion Hampton.
I think one thing I also overlooked is this gives an opportunity for Kamani Vidal to fit in those opportunities and be that change of pace back for them that they've needed. I'm a really big Kamani Vidal fan. I would have loved to see him get an RB2 opportunity with this team, but he'll definitely be able to fit that role, kind of a little bit of what J.K. Dobbins brought to that offense. But you're right, the injury history was way too much, way too coveted, and he's on the wrong side of age to look at it and go, okay, we got to bring this guy back on a 1-year deal.
Yeah. So my general team building theory would be you draft a running back every year, you draft a linebacker every year, you draft an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman every year. So if you hit those 4 positions every year, you'll never need to give a running back a second contract. Now, that being said, so Josh is a Baltimore fan. Owen and I happen to be Bills fans. There are 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, 22 of which podcast once a week. But out of the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, there are 2 Chargers fans. So one is Brock Vieira, and the other, his name is Chris. I want to say it's Chris Connor, but I would need to verify the last name. So we all have different theories, and what I liked about that last take on J.K. Dobbins is Owen and Josh didn't agree, and there's going to be plenty of times that you're going to see people not agree on this station, and that is completely normal, right? Like, if you want to go back, you can listen to Owen and Newt go back on Amika Igbuka.
Every time. It's going to be availing this year. That one's going to be the argument.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to finding out which players we don't agree on this year. Right now, I think the wide receiver on South Carolina is my early vote for the player that is going to be like the most polarizing as to how somebody stacks them up. So, but that being said, Midlife, thank you for being active in the chat. That's very kind of you. I hope you liked what you saw. Gennaro, thank you for stopping by. Brandon, you're here nearly every night. Thank you very much. For Josh, Owen, myself, the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you for watching, everybody, and we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow night.